thing that offended them so much was that on your menu, you wrote Israeli recipes and you wrote like Israeli/Palestinian hummus.
My clients were from everywhere, but I didn't have an identity. It's a Muslim place or not. It wasn't relative. Concept. When you have negative reviews for no reason, when you start having people telling their friends not to buy because I support genocide, because I support Israel, it became like a harassment. This is an example of how they bully you into doing something else. This is why I talk to other friends, actual Palestinians. I told them, you see what's happening? The mob and the demonstration. They all told me they do not participate. I'm telling you, the actual ones, or most of them at least, do not participate in the protest, in the chanting, in nothing.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Yasmine Mohammed podcast. Today, my guest is Mohamad. Mohamad Ghaoui is a Palestinian-Lebanese man who grew up religious and worked with the PLO in the 2000s. Mohamad is deeply committed to resolving the refugees and right of return issues. We'll talk a bit more about that and how he wants to resolve them. And he believes that the resolution of this right of return issue is essential for overcoming barriers and paving the path to lasting peace. He actively opposes the Lebanese ban on communication with Israelis, which maybe some of you didn't even know is a thing, which hinders progress towards understanding and reconciliation. Mohamad speaks up in support of decriminalizing dialogue with Lebanon's neighbors. Actually, Mohamad, before we get into it, because this wasn't even one of the questions, but I just realized maybe some people aren't even aware. So we'll have to make sure that we talk about that, about how it is
No problem.
how it's like a criminal act for Lebanese people to even speak or interact or have any kind of friendly relationship with Israelis. But before we get into that, I want to hear about you personally. I want to hear about your different identities. So we mentioned Lebanese, we mentioned Palestinian. You've also got, you're in America now, so you've got all of these different identities. And I'm wondering, how do these different identities intersect? How do you navigate them all? So tell me about it all, and tell me about your family and your childhood growing up in Lebanon.
Well, they don't really I don't know how to say it now, but we will start. We'll go to the beginning. At first, when we grow up, we don't actually care about the identity. We don't know what the identity really means. Like if we're called Palestinian, we're Palestinian. That's it. We go ahead with it. And effectively, like the time I grew in, it was active wars between. I grew up in Lebanon, so there was the Israeli invasion in '82. There was civil war already happening, and then there was active wars within the civil wars, with the Palestinian also, the part where we had the war of the camps with the Amal militia, then with Hezbollah, then so all of this. Uh, During all of this, I remained in me and everyone else, basically who's not fighting, are in a bubble, which is our, let's say, camp and the neighborhood. We don't interact with other groups. That goes for almost everyone. I think Lebanon in general went into those deep divided groups, you know.
Yeah, very
So not
sectarian.
just you don't know about Israelis. Basically, there are some people who don't know that, let's say, Sunni and Shia don't know each other. They don't have a Christian friend. They don't have a Durzi friend. So it was every area, it has its own identity. And basically, because of the war, every crossing, every major street is basically like a border. So people stayed in their zones. So,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. I mean, during this time, of course, I'm not saying you don't cross, but it just generally you don't cross. It not just open playground. You don't go visit people. You have to go with someone to make sure nothing happens on the way. So basically, that was the kind of bubble. And during that time, On the other hand, we also had free education. I think most people, most kids in my age also used that. Almost everyone went to school at that time. So weren't directly involved in the war, but still affected by the war. We just stay in our bubble. Now, this is to tell you about the identity thing. It didn't really matter. You have this one identity. The world is very small to you. Nothing else is actually in consideration. The first time you start actually thinking about the identity is when you finish elementary, when you're going to go to high school, or you want to go to college. At this time, there's no more free education. You have to make a path. Like any kid, this is how the sequence starts. So you have to ask, okay, what do I study? And even if you like something, can you work with it? Because basically you're banned from working anything. Why are you banned? Because you're a refugee. Why are you still a refugee? Because you still have to work for your right of return. This is what they want you to do. So this is where the identity comes to play. This is when you get it. Oh, I can't do that. It's not like I can be an engineer or a doctor or whatever you want. There's
Oh,
almost nothing.
sounds like you're describing an apartheid to me.
It is, which kind of which is gonna
So
bring me to the other comparison. This is same story in Lebanon, in Syria, and I
mm,
don't. I'm not super familiar with Jordan, but I hear stuff. At least it's better. Not fully. They still have identity discrimination, but still they have something. But in when you compare it in Lebanon, mostly, or in Syria, it's much worse.
wow.
You have that barrier of identity.
And so the fact that so is one of your parents Lebanese and your other parent
My
Palestinian?
mother is Lebanese, so basically, according to Lebanese, I'm not Lebanese.
Because it
I
has to be
can
the father, otherwise it
has to
doesn't
be the father.
count because it's a
Yeah,
patriarchal. Wow. So many layers of
exactly.
persecution.
So when you talk
Unbelievable.
about the identity, automatically, if you're born in area X, you would assume that identity because you're there, you're living there, your friends, your family, neighborhoods, neighbors, stuff like that. But you can think that, but if you say it out loud, you can face I mean, not every time, not everything I'm gonna say from now on. If I got mistaken and said identity, there's nothing. I hate generalizations, and sometimes if I do it by mistake, I'm sorry. But in general,
And also
in
sometimes it's necessary to have conversations. Sometimes like
yes,
we understand, we have the cognitive ability to figure out that you're giving us generalizations, you're
exactly.
talking about your personal experience, yeah, go ahead.
So if you're talking to people like, say, I'm Lebanese, if I'm talking Lebanese accent, it's gonna slip. No one will gonna ask you. But if you're actually, let's say, talking politics, you're gonna face two options. If you stay away, they're gonna tell you, "Oh, so you live here, but you act like you don't care. Like, is this a hotel for you? Like you don't interact with local politics. And if you do interact, hey, why are you interfering? This is none of your business."
Damned
So
if
you
you do,
can
damned if you
always hit with
don't.
a bad response to when you talk politically. So again, you get faced, okay, you can't do anything, you can't say anything. And going back when I said you have to start your options, uh, kids are at that age, generally between 15, 17, you have to choose. You can either go to college if you can afford it. But again, you don't go to college assuming you're going to stay. You're going to go to college you're going to bet or gamble that by the time I get my diploma or something, I hope I'll get a visa to use it somewhere else because you can't really
Mhm.
use that degree locally. The other option is you start um, doing what I did, just freelance, do your own jobs, do your own stuff. You can't be an actual employee, and this is just it's illegal, but still it's civil violation. So if you're caught, you pay fine, you get fired, but you keep doing the same thing.
And also, you're not
You find your own.
protected as as a not I can't say an employee, but as a worker, as even as a contractor, like you're not
I know.
protected through any
No,
kinds
there's
of,
nothing.
yeah, they can screw you over and decide not to pay you or whatever they want to do because what are you going to do about it? You're doing something under the table. So,
Well, actually, yeah, yeah. I was stubborn. I wanted to do my own job. So I actually, this is how I started learning business. I had ideas. I started going into those ideas, but to actually do them, I had to put someone in charge to sign the documents as Lebanese.
a
And
Lebanese person.
my first two companies, I made bad choices. Not companies, just small business. I made bad choices. When the business picked up, started having clients, I was the one kicked away because
Hmm.
legally I own nothing.
Yeah.
I do the job, but in the back end, I'm not registered.
Yeah.
I'm nothing on the official papers.
Yeah, I could see
And
that happening a mile away. Like I suspect it's something that these kinds of corruptions would happen all the time.
yeah, and let's not forget the third option. The third option is always available for people like us to go join a militia. Now, it doesn't start like
Oh.
by being armed yourself, but it's an option. You can get a small salary. It's a fixed salary. At first, it's gonna be, just some money, some pocket money, and then you start, doing what you're asked to do. Then you upgrade, you progress like you do in a job.
So, as a Palestinian in Lebanon, you're restricted to lots of different jobs. You're limited to some specific jobs. If you're educated enough or if
No,
you are
basically,
entrepreneurial,
there's no allowed jobs. Don't think of it as
wow,
restricted jobs. Like you make it sound like you have 100 jobs and you're restricted from 20. No, think of it as you're restricted from the 100 jobs. But exactly, if you want to go by the law, it's 73 jobs you're restricted from, almost everything.
wow.
I think we
Okay.
broke it.
You can't hear me? Who broke? Am I frozen?
Uh, yeah, now so yeah,
Okay. So you're
yeah.
restricted from basically, so even
Uh,
before you get educated, you have to think about what are the jobs that I could what's the point? Even if I have an interest or a passion or a talent in this field, what's the point of even going into it? Because I probably won't be able to work in it because most jobs are restricted from you.
exactly.
So your options are to either do
Unless you're
things,
thinking or you have an option. Unless you have an option or you're already thinking ahead, you have a family who's applying for a visa, you have immigration path,
to get
something.
out.
You're not going to do an engineer job, an engineer education for 5, 6 years and do nothing with it. If you're going
Right.
to do a doctor, uh, some people do it, not a lot, but because you're also going to be restricted in working within the camp or maybe at UNRWA hospital, UNRWA funded hospital.
Hmm.
So also, even when that small window of honorable jobs, it's limited because supply and demand.
Hmm.
You can't even
Hmm.
have a full graduation class find jobs. Maybe one or two per year.
Wow. And so I would assume that a lot of people would take the militia route if they weren't successful in school and if they don't have any family or opportunities to get out of the country, it's really the only option that's left to them is join
Yeah.
Hezbollah.
Yeah, well, yeah, but basically for us, before Hezbollah is graduation if they take you.
Mm.
But
Oh,
first,
wow.
yeah, first we weren't on good terms with Hezbollah. First, Palestinians were fighting Hezbollah as they fought Amal before that. They were different, like they were clashing during the civil war. During the war of the camps were surrounded by Amal militia for like 6 months. There was nothing coming in or out. That was actual famine, actual survival mode. So you would join PLO at the time,
Right.
and there was a lot of different movement. It wasn't as obvious as right now, like Hamas, but then Hamas was emerging. There's Islamic Jihad. They always had small groups everywhere. Now they are the majority. They uh,
Mhm.
they did take over the camps, majority of the camps by their alliance with Hezbollah. They started getting funds. They started doing local coups and takeovers. So they are more powerful right now. It wasn't the case, but PLO started weakening after they became PA and disarmed in Lebanon and stuff like that. So some parts of it's very divided. We can talk
Yeah.
about this forever. I don't want to dive in too much
Yeah.
to it. So briefly, I'm going to explain. After PA decided they're going to disband, surrender the arms in Lebanon and other places, uh, many parts, like let's say a commander in PLO would decide, no, I'm not going to do that. So he became his own group. So his
I got
brigade,
it.
yeah.
Just
So
factions.
those
Yeah.
brigades later agreed to remain as armed resistance. So they
Hmm.
went with the highest bidder or whoever pays them, aside from
And
the
so
Palestinian Authority.
I tell me the route. How did you end up with the Palestinian Authority or with the PLO?
Well, just looking for a job. I actually, so my father didn't tell me much about his part. He was with PLO. I didn't know that, by the way. I knew it, but I didn't know details. He never spoke of it. He left that part with a lot of psychological issues, so he decided not to share it much. He maybe shared one time that it's kind of bullshit. That's it. He didn't dive into
Hmm.
detail. I was looking. I started. Back then in the 1998, technology was new, so I was working, learning with that, making money by doing freelance jobs. It was good at the time. Around 2003, I think, or 2004, they decided to. The Palestinian Authority started to open what we call consulate or embassies. It's not officially state, but technically in the Arab world, they have now embassies. So that's when I applied. I started working with them as a tech. And
Sorry.
so that
Give me
was
one
my
second
job.
here.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, we're going to edit that out. Please repeat. So you were working as a tech?
Yeah. IT. So my job wasn't political, but as an IT, you get to see a lot of meetings, a lot of things, a lot of information that comes different from what you know. And you go into secrets, like not necessarily secrets, but stuff that politicians don't say on the air versus what they say behind the scenes. And this doesn't include just the Palestinian politicians. It includes the Lebanese politicians they are meeting with.
Hmm.
So the time I was in, it was interesting because it was the time they wanted to reconciliate with Lebanese militias also, all of them. Because also Lebanese militias were disbanding except Hezbollah, uh, and they all had beef with PLO because everyone blames PLO for it's part of the war in Lebanon. So PLO was doing this sort of apology, let's start a new page thing with them. So that's the kind of stuff I was witnessing at the time. You can see
Wow.
all of these meetings with Jaja, with Berri, with uh, everyone who mattered. Everyone who mattered, they had to do a meeting to explain their new strategy and that, oh, we're not gonna interfere with the Lebanese politics anymore. stuff like that. But it is funny.
Hmm.
Like, I know it's a little out of the topic, but just to to give you a sense of how people think. Like, um, it's now okay for they think it's okay. Let's say Lebanese Palestinian resistance, quote unquote, with their alliance with Hezbollah or something. But I'm gonna give you an example. People who know the Lebanese politics will understand it. Uh, a journalist, and this was off the air, it wasn't public, but a journalist asked the ambassador back then. He was also called Abbas Zaki. Uh, he asked him, okay, why are you doing reconciliation with Jaja, who was, the Christian militia,
Hmm.
the Lebanese forces? So he took him off there and said, so why did you ask me? Why did you ask me about why did we reconciliate with the Christians? You didn't ask me about why did we do it with Deli, the Muslim Shia one. So
Hmm.
because people would think, oh, we can't forgive that guy for the back and forth massacres that happens, but with Berry, we also had the same reality. The war of the camps was over 6 months. It wasn't a picnic, and it was okay for the general population to say, we're doing, we're reconciling with the Muslims. So that you understand that probably how
Yeah.
this is okay to get back to, but let's make peace with these guys because probably they are
Hmm.
at least Muslims. Let's not make peace with the other guys. That
Yeah.
wasn't the policy. Luckily, it wasn't the policy, but the general reception of the idea. This is how they ask questions. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of stuff when you are involved locally or you see it behind the scenes, you start uh, you start having different perspective about everything. You start
Hmm.
comparing. Okay, I can't judge this if I can't. If I don't have the same principle with everyone, I'm a hypocrite.
So you
W-
started believing your father who said that it was all bullshit. You started to
Yeah,
see that.
yeah.
Hmm. Now, were you ever ideologically aligned in any way or the other when you started doing IT for them, or was it just a job? Like, did you start to feel disillusioned in one way or
Well,
another, or?
basically, my group, yeah, my community, we grew up with Fatah, the
Okay.
PLO. So I
Hmm.
was aligned with them. I didn't know why. And to be honest, until this day, like I was aligned with the Palestinian Authority. It's, like when you read something on the paper, it looks very good.
Hmm.
What PA decided to do in the 2000, that period I was in, I believe in it. It looks good on paper. It
Hmm.
looks good. It was a peace plan. It was, everything everyone hates right now. All Oslo was a betrayal. Peace is a betrayal. You shouldn't do that. You guys, and which begs the question. Okay, so why is it okay? Let's say uh, a Palestinian who's allied with Hamas is okay to have an opinion, but Palestinian who's allied with uh,
Peace.
PA isn't. And even if
Hmm.
we had the PLO, the burdens and the war it had, still they decided to move on, right? You have to take that. Like reach out. Okay, you can't judge anyone forever. And this is part of my general philosophy as sins of the father, especially for
Hmm.
religious groups like Muslims, Jews, Christians. You don't believe in sins of the father. So what we have right now is a fact. You have to deal with it. You can't keep saying you were at fault, I was at fault, or your grandfather and my grandfather. I have nothing to do with it.
Hmm.
So this is
Well,
why
that's a
I don't really.
philosophy.
Yeah,
It's a very it's a very rare philosophy in your part of the world. Unfortunately, if more
it
people
is.
would think that way, then they would be more forward thinking. But there's so many people that are so busy crying about past grievances that they can't help to create a good future for themselves because they're too focused on, you know, the victim
Exactly.
narrative.
But this is
Yeah.
what's amazing when you read and when you see what's written, what's the planned, the plan. It says something and they do something else. If you're
Yeah.
sticking to the plan or what's your objectives, it includes no sins of the father. We have to wrap up that page. But everyone, whenever you corner someone in any subject, they have to shift the narrative. Okay, oh, let's talk about what you did in the 80s.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, if
80s.
it
They
didn't,
go all the way back. Let's talk about the
yeah, yeah,
40s. Yeah.
no, they're gonna go 70s, 60s. It's gonna
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
step by step until they find a gotcha moment. Like, see,
Yes.
I told you, you started
Yeah.
it. Okay,
Yeah.
I started it. Now what?
Yeah. Yeah. Now what? That's the big question. So you talk about the right of return, and a lot of people, when I had this in the bio, so many people had questions. So can you talk to us about what were you raised to believe about the right of return? Like, did you actually believe that you would be going back to Palestine and that it would be from the river to the sea and Israel would be annihilated and, then you will leave
Okay, that
Lebanon? Like, did you actually believe that? Is
okay.
that what they told you, first of all?
No, to be
And
fair,
secondly,
yeah, uh, people don't see this. Despite the war, PLO or PA wasn't really religious. The members
yep,
wasn't really basing their stuff on religion. This is why sometimes if I hear right now a chant somewhere, from the chant, foreigners don't understand it, but from Arabic, if you see a chant that has a religious background, it's usually Hamas or PIJ. If it's more, general and dreamy and secular, it's PLO.
hmm
Apparently, they look the same to everyone, but from the
hmm
foundation, it was a little different. We were convinced of right of return, of course, that we have to go back. Let's say my family is from Haifa,
hmm
uh, born there, moved to a journey to West Bank, then to Lebanon, all my life. Luckily, I'm not gonna talk about my parents. Let's stick to the general
yeah.
before, because
Generally,
it's
I'd just like to
yeah.
know, like, what was your
Generally,
belief
yes.
then
We
and what is
are
your
forced
belief
we
now?
are forced to believe it, as I said, from the situation, because you have no other option. The hosting environment is telling you you have no work here, you have nothing to do
hmm
here, you have to go back. That's from the general opinion. The Palestinian leaders has to say the same, because they don't want to fight them and say no, we want to stay. Right now, anything that resembles we want to have naturalization is considered betrayal. If Palestinians said it, they're gonna have retaliation. If Lebanese said it, if any party of Lebanese said it, also the other parties, all your forcing naturalization, especially in a fragile environment in Lebanon, like there's they give too much weight on the religious identity, because voting system is based on the
Yeah.
religion, and if they factor in naturalization for 300,000 Palestinians, it's gonna be Sunni votes.
hmm
Although, if you think about it, it doesn't matter, because you only have this seat no matter what you do. You're going to have a prime minister, you don't have parliament speaker. So it's also hypocrite if you think about it. But but back to your question, so we don't skip it. The right of return, there's two ideologies. The religious one would say from the river to the sea. Uh, the general one doesn't care. Just, let's say, technically they want me to have a right to return to Haifa,
Okay.
whether it's Israeli or not. This is disapproved by the Israelis, because it's
hmm
gonna shift their
The same thing, like the Lebanese are afraid
the
there's going to
same.
be too many Sunnis. The Israelis are
Yeah.
concerned there's going to be too many Arabs, too many
Ho-
Muslims. Yeah.
However, however, if you want to talk about, since we opened this topic and why do I like it, the first myth about this is the numbers. We
hmm
have over-registered numbers. Just an
Yeah, of
example,
course.
my my own family, we only have 2 members out of 50 that are actually still in Lebanon under the uh, refugee document status. Because all of us immigrated, but all of us are registered on UNRWA. Except, of course, except maybe right now, my daughters aren't, but actually my first daughter is, my second isn't. So if you think about it, imagine how the numbers are inflated. There's something, I think it was a trick. If I think about it right now, I think it's a trick. But back then, it was something that made all of us, you know, actually go and register every single member. And during the 90s, they actually said, they told everyone, we're going to get reparations.
Yeah.
So come in, register your family, so we had to register, let's say, even my uncles who are already outside, who left in the 90s, they were long gone. They actually lived all their life in, UK, Australia, and Germany and stuff like that. So everyone registered, everyone. So imagine the inflated numbers. If you take one example during the late 2000s, I think USAID did the census versus UNRWA census. UNRWA census was like 750,000. The USAID 270.
Wow.
And again, forget what they tell you about the right of return. Most of us were just doing everything that's possible to immigrate. We didn't care. Like, I wasn't working on immigrating to Israel. I was working to immigrate anywhere, not just me. Most of my friends already immigrated. We all like, oh, you're lucky. You had this chance. You had this chance. Everyone was working toward that direction.
Just to
So
go to
why?
like France or Canada or America or UK, anywhere else. You
Yeah.
weren't thinking that you would actually go back to
No,
Israel.
no. Actually, I think if we had peace, I would go there. Like right now, I'm American. I can go there if I have money, like anyone. Like, I have no advantage or disadvantage. If I have money to buy in Haifa, I'll buy in Haifa. No one gonna kick me out, right? So actually, peace achieves the same result without all this, without all this problem. If I want to stay forever in Haifa, I'll find a way for naturalization for my kids and do it. I don't, but if I want to do, that means peace gave me this option already. It's
Yeah,
right
that's a
within
great
my
point.
reach right now. So why do I focus on the right of return and the refugee count as a way? One, when you deflate the numbers from, let's put the problems right like this. Right now, if I present you with 1 million people to relocate, it's going to be a huge number, right? Lebanese can't take them, Israelis can't take them, and even West Bank is going to be a flood. It's going to be a huge number to take 1 million people suddenly. But if you take down the number to its real number, which is 250, and again, 250, this is something people don't understand in philosophy. When you say, I lived in Lebanon for 40 years, and you come to me and say you have to go to Haifa, this is actually the displacement. This is forced displacement for me, right? They don't think, because you made the choice for me. I didn't make the choice. I know nothing about Haifa. I didn't live in Haifa. I don't know if I'm gonna be happy there, right? So you made the choice. What I think, if you cut it down to 250, number two, present the option. Don't tell me there's no I mean, actually, it's going to be a question. Why isn't there our countries who can take millions of displaced, often at war times, but refuse to offer optional immigration? Again, to keep it logical, you don't force immigration to everyone. You give it as a choice. You're gonna find out a lot of people like me, like my friends, like the new generation, gonna take that offer, right? So what are you left with? Let's throw a number, 50% of that. And I think that's too generous to say 50% want to go back, because most of the older generation already passed away. So now you're dealing with a number. Again, I'm going to keep it 200,000. I'm not going to say to 100. I'm going to keep it 200,000. So now, even integrating, even worst case scenario, and uh, this is almost impossible, but still presenting 200,000 as a number to for an optional piece for the Israeli government gonna be much more lenient to discuss than millions.
Yes, but it's
Same
very
thing,
important. This whole premise is based on them like
accepting.
admitting the fact that these numbers are inflated, which they will not do because they
They,
get money based on the numbers of
yes,
refugees.
a great point. But that's it. It's not us who are inflating the numbers. It wasn't me. Not me, not
No,
any
I know
other
it's not you.
Palestinian sitting at home saying we are a million. They
No,
tell
it's
us
one
you're a
wrong.
million. We say we are a million. What I'm saying
Hmm.
is this is international organization, your funds, you're spending millions. All I'm saying, okay, instead of spending million, can you spare 100,000 and do an actual on ground census and find out the real numbers? Maybe we're talking about different problem. I'm very confident it's a different problem.
Hmm.
But when they actually do it, when they divert a small fund just for ground people to do actual census and write the numbers, write the families, they're gonna find out uh, only 5% of my family are actual refugees versus 40 to 50 people registered.
Hmm.
And this is one example. You can multiply
Hmm.
that example as much as you want. And on the other hand, there are families who didn't have any immigration, which also happens. But I'm talking about the general number. You're gonna
Hmm.
find it's a different problem.
So let's
Also,
say it's 100,000 people in the end after all this. Are you saying that those 100,000 people that choose to take this option would have the right to return to the West Bank or to somewhere in Israel?
yeah, I mean, it should be at least offered. If they are offered 3 to 4 options, and this is it's like a ball of snow. Right now, Lebanese, and when I say Lebanese, it's the same situation in Egypt, in Syria, in Jordan. But I'm gonna give you the example. Right now, I mean, maybe the last few years are a little different because of the financial crisis in Lebanon and in Syria. But before that, they were getting funds based on the numbers, right? So if you say you declare 750,000 people, the UNRWA get funds based on this number.
Hmm.
This is their cash cow. Now imagine
Yep.
you prove that it's 200,000. Then I give you an option. Like, let's say Europe gives an option for immigration. You know what's going to happen logically? Right now, they don't want to naturalize them because if we keep them refugees, we get money. But when they find out, they can either lose them to Europe and lose the money, or keep them and take part of that relocation fund. I think then naturalization gonna be an option.
Hmm.
They wouldn't offer it, but if you force their hands by offering another solution, they're gonna offer it. Do you see my point?
Hmm.
It's
I
like
do
a
see
game.
your point, but yes, it's just there's so many. Look, we're not dealing with rational people who are interested in the best interests of Palestinians. That's not what's going on here. These are people
Exactly.
that are interested in power, they're interested in money, they're not looking for they have a very different perspective than you have. You're looking for what makes rational sense or what is best for the people involved. That's not what they're looking at. But I did want to ask you one thing because you talked about how you're so discriminated in Lebanon growing up. We talked about how that's very similar in Syria and in Jordan and in other parts of the Middle East. I know that it's true in Egypt as well because my father is Palestinian, and the way my mother's family talks about him, talks about us, his children, and talk about his grandchildren still. They talk about how the the Palestinianness is even passing to his grandkids. So when any of his
Yes.
grandkids do something, that's what my mother's family's comment is like, because it's the Palestinian blood,
Yeah.
that's why, right?
Yes.
So, um, so my point is, don't you think that a lot of people who are Palestinian descent, even though they've never set foot in Palestine, but because of the discrimination that they are, that they are having to endure in the Arab country that they live in, they're going to look at Israel and they're going to say, huh, Arab Israelis are living pretty comfortably there. They're not being discriminated against in the same way. They can work wherever they want to work. They can join the
They don't
government if
know
they
that.
want to join the government. Oh, okay. They don't know that. So you don't think that,
They don't know that.
okay, so they're not being told the truth, because if they knew that, then they would want the right of return. Then they would want to go and live as an Arab in Israel. It's a much better situation for you than being a Palestinian in Lebanon or a Palestinian in Syria or, yeah.
Yeah. Or at least they would stop fighting for the wrong reasons. You know, when
Mhm.
you want to fight economically, you focus on your education, you can compete, you can build something and compete. My idea about Palestinian state is, I always say, it doesn't need approval of USA or Israel to do a Palestinian state. I think if Palestinian Authority wants to be a state, it can say F you to everyone and be a state today. How? We
Yes.
got the
Oh,
money, we got
mhm.
we spend it in the wrong stuff. Just start doing your infrastructure, your universities, your services, and then they gonna recognize you as a state whether they like it or not. Then you can
Mhm.
compete. Then why do I need the right of return when I can build it? They're gonna tell you a lot about the blockades, but the blockade is, it's like uh, a chicken and egg thing. Oh, because,
Yeah.
but if you stop the militias and stop doing bad thing, that's when all the Israel has to withdraw all the checkpoints.
Yeah. I
They
mean, and
don't
they also
exist
have to
because
protect
they,
themselves. That's why the
yeah,
blockades
and they
exist.
don't like. Listen, look at it from financial way. Israelis don't want to spend money on checkpoints and
Mm-mm.
security. They want to
No, and
save money.
they would rather have peaceful neighbors, of course. They also don't want to be worried
Exactly.
about buses blowing up or pizza places blowing up, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of money, this is something I also am very well aware of, how much money goes into corruption. And
Hmm.
another layer to that corruption, in the West, which is a little better, a politician cannot be the businessman. But back
Hmm.
home, the politician is the businessman. There's
Hmm.
nothing called conflict of interest. So they do the
Yeah.
business, they legislate for the business, and you remain a worker all your life because they control everything, both layers, and you work for them. If you work at a company or a construction company or a hospital or something, it's all for them.
Hmm. Unbelievable. So now I have to ask you about
So just
getting
the
out of, yeah, go ahead.
last second, sorry, last second to wrap that topic up. This is why I said the West has, if they want to help, they can offer a solution like immigration or something. It doesn't even need to happen. But once it's offered, and if me as a cartel or militia, I'm gonna lose my population, I'm gonna lose my fuel to this fire, I'm gonna start to change.
I mean, it's an interesting strategy, and hopefully somebody, with the ability to make these decisions is listening and they could think about that, and that can be brought to a table and discussions could start. It's definitely an interesting perspective. So let's talk about you in America now, because the whole reason why you and I met was because of this debacle that happened, because you own a deli in
On
Seattle,
past tense,
owned.
past tense.
So tell us the whole story. Why is it past tense? Did I get frozen?
Well, my advocation, I think the screen is freezing. Oh, now it's back. So, my advocation for this piece, I have to connect it back to my advocation to communication. When I said people don't know,
Right.
because we're not allowed to talk. And I discovered this by another major incident in my life when someone sent me a message from Israeli number. I was in Austria at the time. I came back to Lebanon. Someone wanted to frame me. They framed me as collaborator. Why? Because the proof they needed that I have communication with Israeli was an SMS. I didn't hide it because it wasn't. I didn't even know it was like, oh, it's a big deal. But during the investigation, there was other numbers. Not they are Israeli numbers, but they are actually Arabs, friends of mine. Like I was asked, "Who's this?" I answer, "I like." It's not like I'm hiding anything. It wasn't. I wasn't aware that. Oh, this is a big secret. I should have communicated in secret. I was like, "What are you talking about? You're saying I can't even talk to my distant relatives or my friends?" And maybe that's when I realized why far back my family used to get my distant relatives news through someone in elsewhere, not directly.
Mhm.
Anyway, so I did have business, a good business back then. And after this incident, everything started crashing down because I was investigated for like almost a month
Collaboration.
under this,
Mm.
yeah, with the military intelligence. So it wasn't a picnic. It was, uh, yeah. Anyway, I don't want to dive into a lot of details. Not a good memory of my life. Um, After that, that was one of the main reasons I decided I was getting my immigration at the same time. So by the time I got out of jail, I was finishing my paperwork. I came to America, started preparing here to come here. That was around when COVID started. But this is why I mentioned no communication, why the advocation started, because you realize you're not even this. I knew I was communicating for like maybe 8 or 9 years prior. This is why I expanded my knowledge, and this is why I was telling other people about it.
Ah,
So imagine how many people didn't know a lot of this stuff that I discovered. If I didn't communicate, how would I discovered what's really happening?
mhm.
That's a very important thing, that we believe what they tell us on the news. They don't tell us the full story. So this is why I focus on communication, because it's start to build all this a peace plan or something. Because at least you start destroying the wrong information, the misinformation, the myth around all of this. I think the screen is frozen again.
But we can hear you. So you were questioned by the military intelligence and you went to prison because you exchanged some text messages with somebody who was in Israel, even though it was an Arab Israeli and somebody from your extended family. Uh-oh. Can everybody else in the chat hear me and see me? Ari, I'm going to get you to. Oh, how did you get there?
I think Mohammed
Oh,
got kicked out
he's
of the
back.
thing. I think is he back? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I'm back.
Cindy. Okay, great. So you were investigated by the military intelligence and you went to prison because you exchanged some text messages and had some communication with Arabs who were living in Israel.
Yeah, actually, it was the first. The message itself was by an Israeli, but I discovered that even with Arabs, it's same thing.
Okay, so
when
communicating
they
with an Israeli for about you weren't talking about anything political or anything like that.
no,
You were
no, just daily lifestyle.
just daily life stuff. But the fact that you spoke to an Israeli, that was the crime.
Yes, the fact that I had numbers from Israel or West Bank on my phone number, on my communication list, that was a crime by itself.
Wow. And you
Yeah,
believe the
but they
reason why
can.
they do this is so that they can control the narrative, control the propaganda, tell you whatever they want to tell you, and not allow you to find out the truth or to hear any first person accounts from people living in Israel.
Well, they had a different motive. It was public. They told me they were coming after my business, and this was the excuse. But the thing
Yeah.
is, the excuse is legal. And I
Yeah.
told them, but technically, according to the law, even if I work with a company that has an Israeli, not all Israeli, it's still illegal. So I said, basically, all Lebanese can go to jail. The, invest, the interrogator told me, yes, but we get who we want.
Yeah. They choose.
So it's
Yeah.
an umbrella law. It's a
Mm.
law that can apply to anyone they don't like. Anything you do outside the lines, they can use a gap in the law to do it. Anything. So
Unbelievable.
continuing to the story. So I was since then I actually, I started finding my newfound, identity as American using freedom of speech and stuff like that. So I started actually communicating more and uh, advocating more for that part. And I was working in tech all my life. But so when I wanted to do something here, I opened the Deli uh, where the story where we met. So part of it was, I mean, it's one of my, uh, I advocate for it. So why not use it also in my Mediterranean identity? So I
Hmm.
was using Israeli and Palestinian recipes,
Hmm.
and I mentioned it by name. And that's when it started with some silly phone calls, some negative reviews. So I report those. It's fine. It's fine. I kept telling myself till some people actually spoke to me, and I responded and I explained how no, everyone you talk to them, they look convinced because look, it's very easy for me to actually argue or debate someone about our story because I lived it, I know stuff, and they just hear the headlines. So every time I try to corner not, I wasn't even trying to corner someone, but every time I tried to respond nicely, this is peace advocation. Even if you prove like IDF is doing something bad, that's on the army, not on the general. It doesn't change my plan. If you find an IDF soldier who can be convicted of a crime, fine, convict him. Actually, they are investigating more than we do. So
Hmm.
I'm not gonna defend case by case. I don't care. Not I don't care, but it
So,
doesn't change my perception.
of
So they
course.
started, yeah. So I started seeing more aggression. Then people, then I got messages from actually. It was more blatant, like, oh, we're calling to tell you that our group from Microsoft not gonna be ordering because we were advanced against you because you
Okay,
did,
so
yeah.
hold on a minute. So the thing that offended them so much was that on your menu you wrote
Israeli rest.
Israeli recipes and you wrote like Israeli/Palestinian hummus, stuff like
Yeah,
that. And you were doing this because you were advocating for peace and because these recipes are very similar. There are
yeah,
it's the same, it's the Middle East. You know what I mean? Like it's like eating mahshi from Syria or mahshi from
exactly.
Lebanon. It's
Exactly.
gonna be like
But when you mention it's Lebanese or Palestinian or Israeli, because I know for a fact it has a little different addition here or addition
exactly.
there. So
Hmm.
what I did was intentionally made the recipe compliant and I
Hmm.
added it. So this way it was authentic and I get my message. But the
Beautiful.
war started and I only opened maybe September. So when the war started in October, wasn't noticeable at the exact time, but it started. I think one or two people started noticing, and they started, telling everyone, "Hey, stop! This guy is." So actually, some people would come to me, even then, people from the mosque in my city and the mosque,
Okay, that was my
the Muslim,
question.
yeah, they love this stuff.
So it's
This
Muslims who were coming to you, it wasn't Americans, or it was both?
majority through Muslims
Okay.
and Arab.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm,
they actually, they are the one who want to do the. Uh, my clients were from everywhere, but I mean,
mhm,
I didn't have an identity for like it's all too. It's a Muslim place or not. It wasn't
mhm,
relative in my concept. But
mhm,
when they advocate, when you have negative reviews for no reason, when you start having people telling their friends not to buy because I support
mhm,
genocide, because I support Israel, because I
mhm,
support stuff like that, it became like a harassment. And now this is why I mentioned the other story, because the first time I actually, in 2019, I lost millions on this stupid stuff.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I was starting fresh here, like nothing. So financially, it wasn't a big stab in my heart. It's like, oh, to me, really. I mean, I was upset. It was hurting me, but still, it's still from my side. I would say, screw you. I did it once. I did it twice. I'm gonna do it the third time, because uh, I mean, we have nothing left if not a principle or something. And this is
Mm,
something I would hope everyone would start changing, because this is an example of how they bully you into doing something else. This is me. And this is why I talk to other friends, actual Palestinians who came from Ramallah, from Israel, Arab Israelis, and other people. I told them, "Do you see what's happening? Not about my place, about the mob and the demonstration." They all told
mhm,
me they do not participate, and I'm telling you, the actual ones, or most of them at least, do not participate in the protest and the chanting and nothing. And I say, okay, why don't you tell our friends not to do that? Say, no, no, no,
mhm,
no, we don't want this fight.
mhm.
Because you understand how when you get pressure from the whole community, it's hard. I
Yes,
mean,
I do understand that. And in fact, I think
you
every
understand it
American
personally.
watching, well, I understand it personally, yes, but I think a lot of Americans have a lot of have trouble understanding it. So I'm going to make a parallel for them, because they say things to me like, well, then how come the Gazans who we see in the streets, or the Palestinians who we see in the streets, are calling for death of all Jews, burn Tel Aviv to the ground, river to the sea, stuff like that. But then how are you telling me that the silent majority don't believe this, and um, they don't want to be fighting with Israel, and they want peace and prosperity for themselves and for each other? How can you be telling me this when I can see this on the news? I can see these videos. I can see what Hamas did, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
But if they look
both
at
are
their
true.
own country, both are true. But if they look at their own country right now, the tail is also wagging the dog, right?
Yeah,
So when they're talking about all of these issues that people have, like all of these gender issues that are going on, right? So all of these, so many problems in society that we're all blaming on the woke ideology, right? All of the DEI stuff, all of the
exactly.
whiteness
The
is
cancel
evil,
culture, what they call the
the
cancel culture.
cancel culture, da 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 da. Isn't that minority of extremists as well? Aren't your silent majority opposed to all of these things? So they can understand that it's the same thing for us. Of course, our extremists are actually terrorists with guns, and they murder
Yeah,
people and they
I
kidnap
say
people.
they still got it easy with the cancel culture
Of course,
online.
of course.
We get it. We get it. I mean, I'm an example. This is my second time repeating the same story. I got jailed. I lost the business. I lost the second business, and this is the easy part. More people get, hurt, jailed, tortured, stuff like that. This is our version of cancel culture. So this is how you
Yeah, a
educate
lot
one
worse.
person to apply it for other people.
Yeah, and that's why it's so frustrating to me because I can see someone like you and I'm absolutely floored and in awe that you're willing to do this again and again, start from scratch and say, nope, I'm going to maintain my integrity. I'm going to maintain my principles, even if it means I'm going to lose another business and I have to start from scratch again. But and you're somebody who really, you had to claw your way. You were considered a refugee. You were not given the same rights as everybody else. Like you literally blood, sweat, and tears had to claw your way to this business of millions of dollars and then to lose it all and then to somehow manage to pick yourself up again, start it up, create another business in the United States of America, the freest country in the world, and then the same thing happens to you again. And you're still maintaining your integrity. But there are people in America, Canada, France, Sweden, Germany, you name it, that are too afraid of, forget cancel culture. They're just too afraid that somebody might call them a mean word or that somebody might judge them. And they put their integrity to the side, they put their principles to the side, and they allow these bullies to control them. And that's why it's so frustrating to me. Is like, what are you up against? What are you up against? If you compare yourself to somebody like you, Muhammad, or compare yourself to like the Iranians fighting against the Islamic regime, then you are so lucky and you are so privileged, and you should be speaking up and defending secularism in your countries.
Yeah.
You should be speaking up and defending peace, for example, but they're not doing that. They will be bullied by these pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas supporters in the same way that Arabs and Muslims get bullied, except the difference is they won't be killed for it. They won't lose their families for it. They won't lose their communities and their friends, and they won't go to prison. You know what I mean? The stakes are so
There
much
is
lower, and they're
there is
still
the
not
last part
willing to
of the
do it.
equation I want to add. The last part of the equation, part of the fear, is the eternal damnation, the religious part.
Exactly. That too, of
And this
course.
is funny because everything, most of these groups know about religion. They know it from clerics, from political clerics, not actual religious leaders. They pretend it's, of course, the majority of the problem is religious Islamic fanatics. We can't, if we keep hiding that, we're not going to solve it.
Exactly.
So that's another thing people have, and we discussed this very briefly for 10 seconds before. Either by rejecting it incomplete, or if you choose to do your religion, I'm all the way with you. Just go back to your book. Stop listening to other interpretations. Everything they can talk. And I'm very well versed. We didn't mention this, but I also, during my childhood and upwards, I come from a religious family. So I was studying Quran daily for at least 2, 3 hours. I'm very well versed in that versus what they say. And I actually went through, like, just for fun. I was that annoying kid who had questions. So I went through, I don't know if you know them, but there's like dozens of schools: Rajabi, Qutbi, Wahhabi, Sunni, Habashi,
Yep.
Shia, same thing. I went with Shamsuddin, Fadlallah, with Hezbollah back at the time, with religious circles. So I went with everyone. I always had this 1 or 2 questions. Every time they mention something, as I said, I'm well versed in the Quran. So I just answer, but the Quran says 1, 2, 3. Says, no, but you don't understand how. So this is the basic rule I say to other Muslims if I'm debating them. 1, if your God didn't send you clear instructions and need a book of riddles to understand it, that's not a religious book. That's not a holy book. Take it at face value. It was clear. Do not kill. Do not do. Don't start doing accept and accept and accept and stuff like that. Number 2, it's not eternal. It says in the Quran, it's إنما هي قصص نتلوها عليكم. It's only stories we tell you. So when he tell me about a story when they fought Jews, it's the same thing as he told me when Moses fought the Pharaoh. It doesn't mean I have to kill the Egyptians today. It was a story at the time, period. So yes, there was a time when they fought a tribe which was Jewish and done. And there's also the Quran, what they call the Quran, by the way. The Quran refers to itself by the book, not the Quran. The Quran is part of it, which is the Constitution. So there's two parts, the Constitution and the stories. In the Constitution, it also has a clear message. It says, believers, Jews, those who became Jews, Bani Israel, children of Israel, Christians, and those who believe in God. It put all these groups as people promised to be in heaven, let alone. So you don't have to enforce your faith on them. They don't have to enforce their faith on you. So that's the constitution. Why do you start making up rules? If you want to be a Muslim, be a Muslim. I'm all for it. Read from your constitution, follow the 10 commandments, and be done with it. So this is my argument. I'm not against anyone believing in Quran. I'm against hypocrites, which is, as it said, Quran, وَيْلٌ لِلْمُنَافِقُونَ. Curse be the hypocrites. So if you want to believe in it, you have a book. But if you want to start coming up to me with invented hadith after hadith to twist a word, that's exactly what politicians and clerics did to make money, to rule you. If you want to be under that, that's a different religion, a different thing. You're free to do it. By the way, if you believe it, you're free to do it, but I'm free to fight you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you declared that in this ideology, you declared that you want to kill me. Even me, even if I identify as Muslim, I'm still an infidel to their interpretation. So if you I don't care about anyone's religion, except the red line is when you want to come after me. That's different.
Absolutely.
That's not any longer of personal freedom. That's not personal faith, because you're coming after me. You declared that. This is when they argue about the war, the same thing. You say, oh, this is genocide, this is whatever. And here I say, apply the same rule. If you want to say this is genocide by intention, then no. Oh, oh la la, you already declared intention, so you don't get to complain.
Yeah.
So stuff like that. It's about
Yeah.
hypocrisy.
It is. And, you know, the truth is only about 15 to 20% of Muslims even speak Arabic. All of them can recite the Quran, but they don't know what they're saying. They don't know what they're reading. They're reading translations that have been translated by God knows who, and what their perspective was and what agenda they were trying to push when they were translating it, right? Just like we know the Saudi translations, the Wahhabi translations into English, you know,
it's not
they
accurate.
add the pepper and the salt wherever they want to add it to make it, you know, according to what they want people to start
I can give
believing.
you one religious example. I often say it from the Quran. Not a lot of Muslims agree with me. It's a small school of thought that agrees with what I'm going to say, but it's an example. The most controversial thing, surah that we have in common about us and the Jews, about the holiness of Al-Aqsa, is basically related to the Surah Al-Isra, where God says, where he took his worshipper to the farthest mosque. That's the first line. So it says the worshipper, and this is to add to your translation thing. If you go now to his site and translate it, I don't know why or who fed it, it says worshipper Muhammad. It doesn't say Muhammad. And from the next verse onwards, it starts, and we gave Moses. The surah is talking about Moses. It wasn't talking about Muhammad. Like, if you as a person never read a book, and this is this book, and you're reading the book for the first time, you read the first line as a worshiper, whoever he is, you don't know who. Then the second line, you start talking about Moses. Who do you assume it is? You assume the story is about Moses.
Of course.
So why do I need, and again, back to my point, if it's holy, it's supposed to address me, not through you.
Mhm.
So if I can understand it as this person, it should follow that person. Another proof is in the same surah, it addresses Muhammad himself, and he answers, "But what am I but a human and a messenger?" If
Mhm.
you're a human and a messenger, which I agree, this is what Muhammad's role was, to relay the message. That means he had no miracles.
Mhm.
Per the book, per Quran. I'm not changing that. I'm not trying to enforce a narrative on Muslims. I'm just saying,
Mhm.
per the book, the Prophet says, I have no miracles. I'm just a human. So why
Yes.
should I listen to someone telling me otherwise? That's your book. Read it.
Mhm. Mhm. So that whole story of him riding the Barak up to the heavens and splitting the moon in
Non-existent.
half and all that stuff is in the ahadith. None of that is in the Quran.
None. I just told you
Mhm.
this is the whole thing they derived all of
Mm.
that from. Where do
Yeah.
you get it from? He wasn't mentioned.
But yeah, but now you're a Quranist, and so you'll be killed just like me because if you're not going to believe Sahih Hadith, then
I'm
they're
not.
also going to see you as
It's
an infidel.
Yeah, but this hadith, he's a guy who was born 200 years after,
I
at
know.
a time
Yes.
where they didn't even document stuff correctly.
Yes.
So why?
Mm.
The only thing I say, okay, Quran was documented because of the amount of people who repeated it, like they repeated the Torah. And also another thing, if you take the Quran by itself, it matches more with the Bible and the Torah. So it makes more sense if you
Hmm.
don't add the other stuff.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
I have a vision where I can see, okay, so my story, my narrative works one A, B, C. It makes sense. But if I add D, E, F, it doesn't make sense. So why should I
Yeah.
add them?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, I love hearing your perspective. I love the way your rational mind works. That's so clean and organized, and it makes me feel happy. But the truth is that people like you and me, this kind of critical thinking or preference for things to make sense and discomfort with dishonesty, that's not the prevalent culture in our lands,
No,
right? Most of the time, I mean, we're talking about 15 to 20% of Muslims. So we're already talking about a small minority. All the rest of them have no idea. They just follow whatever their imam says or whatever their mom did or whatever their
especially
dad
if they're
says.
not even Arabic.
Exactly. Most of them are not. And of the 15% who are Arabs and who can read the Quran and who can understand it, how many of them have actually done that, right? They don't do that. They don't sit down and read it and read the tafsir and think about it
Then they
and do
shouldn't.
the work that you're doing. Most people don't do that. They just take
Well,
whatever narrative is being sold to them at the khutbah on Fridays. That's what they believe. Or
yeah.
whatever all of the ummah around them is pressuring them with threats of violence, do this, do that. That's what they're going to do.
And I would say that was unsolvable problem. But then I saw what they did in UAE and what they're doing in Saudi Arabia. By
Yeah.
removing this class, it's actually working. So now I can say there is a solution.
Yeah.
I mean, I theorized about solutions before, but when I saw it happening, because actually most people don't know, the script is usually sent in advance. Like this week, you have to talk about XYZ, and they do.
Hmm.
Now, when they
Hmm.
fixed that in Emirates, it
Hmm.
was a solution, and we saw progress really fast. Now,
Yeah.
when you talk
Yeah.
about verses of Quran, no one comes and say we're gonna kill you, and that solves a lot of problem in few years. So now I believe that's a way of solving the problem.
Of course, there is, when it is top down, it will be successful, right? The way
Yes.
that in the Arab world, anyway, when it's top down, then people will listen. Even when the UAE starts to say we're going to sell Israeli fruits in the supermarket, and then suddenly there's Israeli flags in the supermarket. You know, when you went to the UAE
Yeah.
before, every map they would like with a black marker they would scrape out the word
Yes,
Israel,
yes.
you
Now,
know,
now
and
it
now
works.
suddenly they're singing the Israeli national anthem, you know, they can it's good. I'm happy to see they're changing their mind. Of course they're doing it for financial reasons or whatever, but it's fine. It works.
Everyone is doing it for
Everybody's gonna
financial reasons,
exactly.
but
I'm
the
happy
others
to
are
see
doing
it.
it on our blood price.
You're right. You're so right. Yeah. The others are doing it for financial reasons too, but to our detriment. At least these ones are doing it with it's bringing about peace and oh my gosh, you're so correct. I never even thought about how sad that state of affairs is. But yeah, and Saudi Arabia removing all of the anti-Semitic ahadith from their curriculum in schools, like these are huge, wonderful, big steps that we're seeing in some Arab countries. So it's good to see. So there is definitely hope, but the problem is you've got Egypt and Jordan and like all these other Arab countries want this division. They want to have the boogeyman, the big bad Israel. They want to be able to blame the Jews for everything. It works in their favor. So until the day comes when it
Yeah, just
is in their best favor to do the opposite, then the populations in those countries will change as well because these people aren't
yeah.
reading the
And
Quran, they're
I
not reading
just
the Hadith, and they're not making decisions based on that. They're making decisions based on the top down. What is the narrative? What is the cultural push?
Yes. So this is what you're saying. At the end, you just said it to make money. So let's focus on that. So all of
Yeah.
this, using the religion, using the business, using the politicians, is to eventually make the money. What
Mm.
and to make the money, they need to keep us in the refugees and the refugee
Yes.
circle, in the right of return, in something they know it cannot be solved. Even if they have a solution, they need it unsolved to make the money. So this is why I proposed if other people want to get involved, even if Israel want to do it, like they spend so much on military budget every year, if they can lobby a country like they took millions of Syrians or millions of Iraqis or millions of Afghanis or millions of Ukrainians, they can lobby to take 1 million. You know what's going to happen? Just even if it didn't actually happen, just let's say, quote unquote, Denmark said, okay, we're willing to take 1 million applications. Once the others gonna see, oh, the money's going away, they gonna propose, no, 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 let's solve it and take the money.
Yeah.
I'm oversimplifying, of course, but
Inshallah.
for the
Yeah.
for the sake of argument, I
Yeah.
oversimplified.
Yeah. All right. We're going to open it up to some questions now. Um, Mira, I really hope that you're going to raise your hand because you're writing some fantastic stuff in the chat there. But let's start off with Cindy. I think I saw your hand raised first.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I was wondering if you could clarify. I know Mohammed said that his father's family or his father was from Haifa. And I'm just wondering if you could clarify how the family became Palestinian refugees in Lebanon. There's a disconnect for me when I hear that, especially when I hear that you still have extended family that's in Haifa or in Israel. So I'm just wondering, was historically, were they pressured or were they evicted? Or did they voluntarily leave Haifa? Or how
And
did that come to be?
in our case, I just know they were told to leave. They can come back when it's safe. But as far as I know, there are multiple truths. So there was some regions had war, some regions went, just they were told to leave, come back in 2 or 3 weeks. 1 month is gonna be solved. It was never solved. And some people were actually just out of fear. Some people were in the fighting zone. So there's multiple truths to that. I told you in our case, it wasn't actual fighting, but People argue always it's this narrative or that. No, it's multiple narrative. It's multiple truth.
Okay, because this is just a thought that I had, and I could be off base, but it makes me wonder about it. I know you mentioned that you were considered to be a collaborator when they saw Israeli phone numbers on your phone, and that you were communicating, with people in Israel.
But by the way, to clarify, they didn't see it. They wanted to get me.
Oh,
So
they wanted to. Oh, okay, all
they
right.
digged into my record on their side from the ISP. They got the records that I have SMS and they got me. It's not like they got me and opened my phone. They had the information ready.
Okay, okay, all right. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. But just the idea that you were in communication, they knew that you had some connections with Israel. I'm
Yeah.
wondering if that's more the issue, because to me, I mean, and maybe I know that there are multiple stories, but I've been told that Haifa is a city where there are many different people living, some Muslim, some Arab, some Israeli, Jewish, some maybe
Yeah.
Christian, whatever. So I'm just wondering, how we go from, like, is it that they didn't want to accept your family as Israeli,
No,
or
no, no, no. It's
or is
not
the
about me.
problem?
It's not about me, and it's not about Haifa's internal politics or Tel Aviv or Israel. It's about the refugee camps in Lebanon, in Syria, and elsewhere. We're not allowed to communicate with anyone Israeli or have a Israeli number 97 plus 972. That's banned. So even, by the way, even in my case, that like if I was in Lebanon, the message wouldn't come through. The reason it came through because I used to travel at the time, so I would get the SMS while I'm roaming. That's why. Basically, you're not allowed. I seen people in while I was held. I seen people. I swear to God, one guy was arrested for having a message on Facebook from an Israeli. He didn't even know he's Israeli. It could have been advertisement. It could have been catfishing, whatever it is. Just because he had it, he was arrested. He knows nothing. At least I knew my situation. I know what I was getting myself into. My friends. This guy was also arrested. Nothing. He knows nothing about what's happening. I was more sad about him than myself because he literally understood, like, he got a message on Facebook. And I was thinking, oh, so I can literally put anyone in prison if I wanted to just by pushing an Israeli to communicate with them.
No, I appreciate that. I understand that in the present, the relative present, that can happen. But I'm trying to understand how your father got from Haifa to being a Palestinian
Refugee.
refugee in Lebanon.
They went to Lebanon for safety
For
and
say,
they
okay,
were never got back. So
okay, okay,
everyone in the Palestinian gathered in groups, in camps. We were in
okay.
what's called Sabra and Shatila. There's in Buruj, in south, in north, and there's like 20 something camps. So everyone went with the group to somewhere and they stayed there. Same thing in Syria and Egypt, elsewhere. So that's
Thank you.
how we're spread.
Thank you. Thank you
Of
very
course.
much.
Thank you, Cindy, for your questions. Sarah, you're next.
Hi, Mohammed.
Hi.
Hi, Yasmin. So I appreciate what you've been saying so far. Like, I don't know about the right of return. I'm not going to comment about that because I have questions about integration that you mentioned, because people who come here right now in Canada, and I can see that integration is not an issue on their mind to the Western society. So I don't know how they would actually do it when they go back to their own country. Different. So you said something about how Muslims should read their book and follow the book. I'm originally from Iran. We learn to read the book as soon as we learn to read Farsi. Like, we learn Arabic and Farsi at the same time. I can't speak Arabic. I understand the Quran really well. And the book that you say people have to follow has so many issues. Like, it's not about the tafsir, it's not about the
Yes
hadith,
and
it's not
no,
about
but continue.
it's not about the Sharia law. Like, this is when you say to, like, not all men do this, but enough men do this to make it a men's issue. Not all Muslims do this, but somehow it's always a Muslim doing it. Like, we have 15 different verses that talk about Malak al-Yamin, that what your right hand possesses. And they are still taking, like, ISIS killed so many Yazidi women.
Yeah.
There were slave markets based on the actual book. Whatever the Taliban is doing to Afghanistan, whatever the Islamic regime is doing to my people, this is based on the actual book. And my fear is that when you say not all Muslims do it, or the real Muslims don't do it, or if the real Islam is not like this, that's the real Islam. That's the actual book that is stuck
That's
in
the
the 7th
reality.
century. It is
That's
what
the
it is.
reality. True.
Yes. But if we do not talk about it, if we do not own it, if we do not say these are, like, people keep telling me, but that's not the real Islam. And we have a really awful saying in Iran about what we do to the real Islam. The other Islam and this Islam and all the other Islams, they are all the same to me. As long as I'm half a man, I inherit half my brother. My witnesses
Also
in
not true.
court is half, but this is what the Quran verses
Yeah,
say.
I know.
And Nisa says that.
No,
And
it's not
Nisa
saying that.
11 and Nisa 12 says that
No.
I inherit half a man.
Yeah, no, it doesn't say that. That's what's interesting. Why it's easier for me, and this is what Yasmine mentioned. You need to know Arabic, and when I say Arabic, it's like reading. I'm not saying it's not a problem. Everything you said is a problem. I agree 100%. But why it's easier for me? Because I know Arabic. When I say Arabic, notice that Lebanese, Syrian, Egyptian, Emirati, Saudi, everyone speaks different type of Arabic. So which one is Arabic? There is an Arabic, like you say, Archaic English. When you read a Shakespearean sonnet, you must read it in the original English. If you read it with the American slang
Exactly.
today, you wouldn't understand it. And this is the main problem. Now, when you say, and quick answers to you, when you say you get half what your brother says, no, the Islam, it just describe it differently. There is a complication, but not on regular cases. It says, وَلِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلَ حَظِّ الْأُنثَيَيْنِ. It compared one male to two female, and it said you get same as each one. You actually get equal. Why did it make it complicated? Because you have to read that it has steps. If the ratio is one male to one female, you get half. If the ratio is one male to two females, you get third. The ratio, which it says it's like inheritance constitution. This is where it gets complicated. That if the ratio is one male to three females, like if you have two brothers and six females, that's when the complication happens. But you're right. Everyone translated like, oh, you have to get double and be done with it. Even in that case, and I don't agree with it, but even in that case, there's another continuance, like says, yeah, you don't have to get like a man, but also the man must spend money on you. So you get half the money, but you also get your allowance. So basically, you're in favor.
I don't
So-
like that reading.
I'm not
Right.
I don't
saying-
need
It
a
doesn't-
man.
Wait.
It actually is irrelevant, though. Like Mohammed, if you were the one who was the Sharia scholars making the laws in
Yes.
these Sharia countries, then things would be different. But the truth is that people that get their PhDs in Islamic studies and that are the lawyers and that are involved in creating these laws, they disagree with you.
Yeah,
So,
I know.
yeah,
Not all of them, but
the
only
majority, the
only
mainstream.
the minority agrees with me. The majority
Mhm.
disagrees. You're right. And this is why I said 1000% you're right. It is the problem. I actually started by saying if they don't address that problem, we don't solve it. I don't like what we say
Right.
in Arabic. خب الشمس بإصبعك. I don't like hiding the sun behind my finger. It is the
Mhm.
problem. I'm
Mhm.
saying to me, I see it. I understand it. I understand the book, even though I'm not the full, like I don't practice, but I see it
Mm,
because I read Arabic well. I understand
yeah.
it. And this is what confuses me. I'm like, shit. This is why I say, sorry for, this is why when I hear a cleric speaking, I'm like, you are doing this on purpose. I
Yeah.
don't blame a person. This is why, personally, if I'm face to face with a scholar or a cleric, I'm gonna say you are a hypocrite. You're lying because you know you're fooling all these people. That's my problem. This is why the top to bottom thing agrees because most people don't speak original Arabic and they
Hmm.
rely on all these frauds.
And this is why I liked that you called it a book of riddles, because that is exactly the problem. If this almighty creator of the universe, creator of the heavens and the stars and the galaxies and the billions of planets and the mountains and the sun and the blah, 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 can't write a motherfucking book clearly, then we have a problem. Like, obviously, this book is unclear to your creation. You created human beings. You know the limitations of their minds, and you sent them a book that can be so misinterpreted and that two people can read it and understand two different things, depending on if they have a positive.
Yes and no. I don't want to go, but there's a philosophical part here. Bear with me. It was sent. There's conditions. It was sent to the Arabs of that time because those Arabs were
Right.
totally corrupt. But there's a silver lining in it. You don't even have to read it or believe in it. This is what I said in the other verse. You the only condition the Quran came in to say is follow either religion, and one part is as long as you believe there's a God. So religions, all of them, not just Quran or Islam, require you to believe in a God, except if you're an atheist. Even then, by the way, even then, even atheists, according to Quran, everyone says it's eternal damnation. By the way, it doesn't say that. It always says eternal in it until XYZ, always in the verse. There was never
Okay.
a
Well,
period.
that's a contradiction. Yeah.
Yeah,
It
I don't agree
no,
that
I
that's
just
not
want
based
to
on
end.
my understanding either, because I get like I read all those verses that tell me
Yeah,
there's eternal damnation and I
no,
should be killed for not believing in Quran. So
yeah. Look, this is the thing. I'm not defending the 2 billion Muslims. I'm defending because I read a lot of books, including the Quran, and I also read literature. I read Arabic literature, I read English literature. So I like to understand what the author meant. And to understand it, I like to revert to the original language. Now, this is an advantage I have, not most people have, that I also, as I said, read Arabic literature. So I understand the Arabic as Arabic originally. For example, there's nothing called Shaheed in Quran. Nothing. The only time Shaheed is mentioned, now when you think about it, you're going to notice I'm right. The only time Shaheed is mentioned, the one they translate to martyr, is only mentioned when God speaks about himself. Wallahu Shaheed. God is witness. Shaheed means witness. It's never, go find, search it, Google it. It's never mentioned in a sentence
I,
that
I
you
hear
can
you,
be.
Muhammad, but I'm gonna have to just cut this discussion short
Yes,
only because
it,
it's really
because it
irrelevant
can
to
take
get down
hours.
into these weeds. It's truly irrelevant because at the end of the day,
I agree.
that's not what the mainstream believe, and we're not dealing with the real Islam. Who knows what the real Islam is? Nobody will ever know. It's elusive. It's like the real Slim Shady. No, he
We
hasn't
already,
stood up yet. But the point is the reality of Islam, the reality of Muslims, we know what that is. And so we can talk about that.
this is why we agree that method you mentioned, which I said gave me optimism, as how Emirates did it, like top
Yeah,
down. You
right.
remove all this, then people can figure out. They can then argue like I do. It
Hmm.
wouldn't hurt anyone. But as
You're
long
not
as
even
the
given the freedom, even you as a youth, you were not given the freedom to think and question. When you were asking these
no, I
questions
was
in
kicked out.
Islamic schools, exactly. Yeah.
And kicked out was the sim- uh, the beautified version.
Yeah.
Sometimes it
The,
gets to insults or
mm-hmm,
or harassment or like, oh, you're blasphemy.
mm-hmm,
A lot of stuff. Yeah, I understand. This is why I said, so I'm not trying to contradict myself. I'm saying my
mm-hmm.
point of view as someone who understands Arabic in a different sense. And I agree 99%, my estimation, don't understand that. So we agree there's a problem. I'm
No,
just saying,
I
I
love,
saw it.
listen, we're not going to get rid of Islam. We're not going to convince all Muslims to switch to some other religion. So I love the fact that there are Muslim reformers. I know you're not a Muslim reformer, I'm not a Muslim reformer, but I love the fact that there are people out there that can look at these verses and can reinterpret them and that can try and convince
Yeah,
rational-minded
if you
Muslims
can
to start
if
to
you can
see things
convince 10
differently.
people, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. We just want to try and get them to be, a little less violent, a little less sexist. It's a path. So
Or
if
at
if
least do it for,
reinterpreting, if
yeah.
reinterpreting the Quran or reinterpreting the Ahadith is the path
By the way,
there, then that's
interesting fact
fine.
about Quran that can solve all of this, all most of it, that part of the ruling is you have to follow your country of law. So
Right.
even if you have inheritance law, you have to follow the country you're in, except the only red line in that is you still have to believe in one God. But you still, so basically if
And
they
even
can
that
start,
they don't follow because even in
yeah,
my family, we were told Canadian laws are irrelevant. You
yeah,
are a Muslim and you follow Sharia. Yeah. So
yeah.
even people
But
don't follow that too.
if they
Yeah.
fix this or highlight, there are key
Right.
laws.
Right.
If they
Right.
fix it, they can save us a lot of effort. Like, why should I explain inheritance law when you, as a Canadian, should follow Canadian law? But if you
Exactly.
move
Yeah.
to Sweden, you have to follow Swedish law.
Right. But
That,
but people who are zealots
yeah, they do.
already they wouldn't listen to that because I was actually told just because if you were born in a barn, does that make you a horse? Just because you're born in Canada, it doesn't make you Canadian. You are part of the
You
Ummah,
are
you are
Canadian.
Muslim first, right? That's your identity. And so, yeah. But I hear what you're saying and I love it. I think it's a great message. I hope it is spread far and wide, and I hope more Muslims start to look more closely at their books and try to find a way to
Yeah,
reinterpret things so that they are,
that's up to leaders.
that's great.
Someone like they did in like in Dubai and some other
Yes, because it's
places.
dangerous for
When
them
yeah,
as individuals.
if they do that, they spread it, then everyone would be okay. We adopt the local laws, problem solved. They don't have to
Mm,
overthink stuff.
yeah. So after a few generations, things could change. Instead, we have madrasas in Pakistan. We have the opposite happening. But
You see,
anyway, good for
they're going
UAE.
backwards in Iraq too. You heard about it.
Yes, I do. Yes, I did. Yeah, you sent me the message about that, and then I wrote an article in the Free Press about it. Currently in Iraq, the marriage age is 18, which is really progressive for the Arab world,
Yeah.
and they're trying to claw it back to 9, the magical
Yeah,
age of
but
9.
it's even worse, just to highlight it. They want to allow the religious clerics to modify it up to 6 months after they pass the law. So they pass the law to them, and they can add modification. So it's like giving them
Wow.
free pass. So not only it's not like even clear text. So they say he can have a judgment. The law is to allow
That's
him, a cleric, to
horrible.
have a judgment.
Yeah. Oh
Terrible.
my God. And those clerics, those are Shia clerics, which I might add, they are the pimps in Iran. They are the ones that are doing these temporary marriages and taking girls and women from, low income, low socioeconomic level areas, and they are getting paid and sometimes a Sunni man can suddenly be Shia when it comes to a temporary marriage. Sure, why not?
Why not?
Yeah, yeah.
If
So
he's a pedophile,
this
so
is who
why
they're
not?
exactly. This is who they're giving power to. They're giving power to pedophiles who are institutionalizing pedophilia, cleric pedophiles who are making money off of pedophilia. Okay, I'm going to read you this message because I think it's a beautiful one. It's long, but it's really beautiful, and I think it's a great way to start to conclude this conversation. This is from somebody who says, as an Arab Palestinian Israeli, advocating for peace feels like a losing battle. From one side, we face threatening harassment or ostracism from our own ignorant community that we care about, while on the other hand, the progressive left, when we move to the land of freedom of speech, we get silenced and dismissed. It's exhausting and deeply frustrating to be caught between opposing pressures and to face people who cannot hold nuances. I really believe that people like you who are brave enough to speak and express, at least be given the platform and speak for the better of Arabs. I am sure you really care about your community and your own people. I follow you on X, and please keep writing your articles. It does make a difference.
Well, thank you so much.
So that's beautiful. I
I think
really am
that's
glad that she
a
wrote all that.
heartwarming to hear. I have a small audience, but I write. I don't expect anything. But sometimes when I hear those messages, it gives me,
Yeah.
I don't know, a delight.
Good. I'm glad. And you know what? You should know too that she's brave enough to be here and to tell you this, but there are, countless people who are too scared to follow you, too scared to click like, right? But they're reading what
I
you're
know,
writing
I
and
know.
they are learning, and you are dropping these seeds of truth and these flickers of light. And so you're spreading that ripple effect of truth. So you're
And
doing
I
great
want to
work.
say that, even not to say I'm a unicorn, I'm not. There are a lot of people, especially people I grew up with, I represent, send me messages. They can't comment, but basically
Mhm.
agree with what I'm saying on their behalf. Sometimes they remind me to highlight something, and I do.
Mhm.
So always in agreement. I'm not saying I represent thousands. No, just few people. But I mean, I'm just one person. I represent few people, and those few people hopefully will represent few, and so on.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
And that's all we can
thank you, of
do,
course,
you
for
know?
this amazing platform.
Yeah. Yeah, I do the best I can. It's not a huge platform, but we have to give each other, any leg up that we can because nobody else is doing it for us. So we have to support each other the best way we can. And I 100% support your voice for peace. It has been a real, godsend on Twitter, especially in the days after October 7th, when it was exactly as this commenter was describing. You're stuck in between the Arabs and the Muslims, screaming
Yeah,
for blood, and then you're stuck between the leftist progressives in the West who are just, basically mirroring each other.
yeah, and most
And
of them most of the loud voices don't have skin in the game. So when the
absolutely
Yeah,
correct.
so there's a lot of grift happening at the same time. Uh, they don't care. By the way, and this is it might sound extreme when I say it, but I would respect a Hamas committed fighter's voice than a grifter sitting advocating on our blood, know nothing about it. At least that guy is convinced. At
Yeah.
least you know who you're fighting. But this guy talking about, oh, we have to die. You have to die what? You're gonna finish your coffee and go to the gym.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%. So beautiful. I'm so glad you said it, and I 100% agree with you. So before we conclude, that was such a beautiful conclusion, and I think I want to just like leave it at that, but I want to make sure that there's nothing else that you wanted to share or any words of advice that you wanted to tell us, or if you wanted to share with us where we can follow you or anything like that. I wanted to make sure you get the last word.
Well, no, right now I'm only on X. I used to be on Quora for a while. I stopped writing there, but I had to scrub all my data because when they part of the arrest, they took all my electronics. I had to scrub everything online. So since then, I stopped being online for a while. I got bored. Right now, I'm only on X. But the message is, uh, I think I focus only on one thing, not to be a hypocrite. Sometimes, if you have, look onwards to yourself. If you advocate this on this group, apply the same thing. This is why when I say, if you consider what Israel is doing genocide, for example, but you don't consider what Assad did genocide, you're the hypocrite. If you consider both a genocide, at least we can have the conversation and then we can know what your base is on. The thing is, we have a problem in definitions and in translations. Example, like Quran is one example, but we also have it in social media. Like I could be arguing a Hebrew guy, someone who speaks Hebrew, but we're both speaking in English. So I'm translating my thoughts, he's translating his thoughts. Be patient, understand each other point, to focus on the point, because most of the time people waste energy on arguing the translation of the translation. So we get lost. Focus on the roots. Go back. If you have a principle, write it easier. If someone is listening and he writes complex words, remember, we're not all born English speakers. Sometimes try to use easier language for us, for others. And, because trollers gotta troll, so we don't want to let them have a bigger audience. We just have to clarify our ideas. And again, hypocrisy is my main principle. If you avoid hypocrisy in your principle, we can reach a solution, no matter what it is. Because if you apply the same principles, somewhere we will agree. But hypocrites, those are hard not to crack.
Yeah.
They switch the goalpost with every discussion, with every sentence.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely correct. And quite often, these people who you and I would view as hypocrites we're giving them too much credit, because quite often they're just repeating some trope that they've heard and they haven't
Yeah,
even thought about it or considered it. They just realize, if I say this thing, it's going to get me a bunch of likes and clicks and attention and accolades, so I will do this thing, without ever having any understanding. Like you said, no skin in the game, without having any understanding of what's going on, or trying to take what is going on and extrapolating that, putting it into their own situation where it doesn't fit, all things like that.
I know you want to close, but you reminded me of the things we talked about. So, like the apartheid thing. So when
Yeah.
people talk about it, they only want to focus when it's happening in Israel. But most of the Palestinians who are facing apartheid are outside. So they don't care about them. They don't consider the same rules. And it's more hypocrite when it's coming from people who are there. Like, oh, so you can't work here, but I don't care about what you can't work with me. I want to talk about what you can't work with him. So if you don't
Yes.
fix your own house, it's like, the house of glass thing.
Yeah.
Fix your thing. This is why I'm not, maybe this is actually my final point. This
Okay.
is why when people ask me, I don't criticize Israel enough. I say there is there are Israelis who are already criticizing themselves, and they are working on that. We don't have enough of self-criticism. I need to fix that. We need to fix this. Then we are at moral level, like, oh, we fixed our problems, now it's your turn. Or maybe by then we either won't have any problems. So someone who doesn't have the moral clarity, moral standing cannot preach me. I hope I said it correctly, but something.
You said it perfectly. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mo, for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone who's joined us here today. And we'll see you at the next Yasmine Mohammed podcast. Take care.
See you,
Bye.
everyone. Bye. Bye.
After hearing all that, you might be left wondering, what can I do? How can I help? Well, this is why I created a nonprofit called Free Hearts, Free Minds. We are the only organization dedicated exclusively to helping these free thinkers. We empower them with our programs and supportive community, lifting them up so they can heal, speak out, and begin to make positive changes, not just in their own lives, but within the broader community around them. If this is a cause that resonates with you and you want to make a difference, one way to do that is by donating to Free Hearts, Free Minds. Because not enough people care about this cause, we need people like you to help fuel this change. You can donate via our website, freeheartsfreeminds.com. Thank you. Every dollar you donate makes a difference.